Okay, we'll go ahead and bring the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome. This is the Energy Committee for the Millis, the town of Millis, and we'd like to welcome you this evening. And also noting that it's probably your first exposure for many of you to the Energy Committee, I'd like to provide a short history, brief overview of how we came to be, and go from there. So the Energy Committee was assembled earlier this year, approximately April, with an objective to investigate, research, and prepare recommendations for various initiatives to help facilitate the town of Millis's conservation of energy and adoption of renewable energy resources. The committee includes myself, Craig Gibbons, I'm the current chair, Mr. O'Connell, Mr. Farrar, Mr. Burns, Mr. Gary Babin, Dr. James Lederer, Kathleen Streck, and of which a few of those folks haven't been able to make it this evening. Our collective backgrounds include experiences in science, education, technology, project management and planning, resource allocation, leadership, and we share the common goal of helping Millis to become a more energy efficient community. In approximation to the assemblance of the committee, we also began, in partnership with Medway, a joint application for a joint energy manager between the towns of Medway and Millis. We're very excited about the partnership with Medway. They had undertaken a number of initiatives that we look to pursue in the coming years, one of which is a green community designation, which is something we'll be reviewing this evening. As part of that grant, we were awarded that grant and began the application for an energy manager about mid-year. And we found Mr. Robert Weiss, who assumed that position on August 25th and splits his time between this facility and his office in Medway. As he's gotten started here, one of the key things that he's developing is an energy reduction plan. So that's something that he'll be looking for collaboration from a number of the personnel here in the town of Millis to help gather data to support the initiatives for that ERP as well as future initiatives for the committee. So we thank you for your attendance. We look forward to working with you in collaboration for moving Millis forward in some of its energy consumption and efficiency initiatives. And with that, Mr. Weiss, would you go ahead and share new business?
Thank you, Craig. One of those initiatives that Craig had mentioned is the Green Communities Program, which is a state program. And that's what we're going to hear about this evening. And as energy manager, I've had a chance to see the energy situation in this country, in the metropolitan area, from many sides. As a city planner, somebody who's been involved in starting up energy conservation and solar energy retrofitting businesses, as a general contractor, as a developer of housing and commercial. So it just, as we all know, right now there's a somewhat of our energy crisis going on right here, right now, with a kind of a pipeline constriction for gas, and that means we all know that our energy costs are going to go up, especially our electric. We don't know how much. But wouldn't it be nice if we could have a little bit more security, a little bit more assurance, and a little bit more sustainability in our costs, in our daily life, and just knowing how much it's going to cost us to run our households and to run our businesses. And so that's really what we're going to talk about tonight. Kelly Brown is here from the Green Communities Division of the Department of Energy, the Commonwealth's Department of Energy. And she's going to tell us tonight about the Green Communities Program, and so that we can have a really good discussion as the days go on about this town participating in the Green Communities Program. So, Kelly, if you would.
Let's make sure I can talk in here and not trip over the cord. So good evening. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here in Millis tonight talking about the Green Communities program and specifics. I always just like to start out with a little bit of background on the Green Communities Division. So the Green Communities Division is a division at the Mass Department of Energy Resources, and it serves as a hub for all 351 cities and towns, and we look at serving for anything related, any matters related to energy. Tonight I'm really here to talk about the Green Communities Designation and Grant Program, but before doing so, I always like to talk about a couple other things that are just general services that we offer to all 351 cities and towns. We have Mass Energy Insight, which is a free web-based energy management tool, which Millis is currently using. I believe Bob signed up in the last couple months to use the tool, and it's a web-based energy management tool free to all 351 cities and towns, and it allows communities to be able to track energy conservation measures they're implementing, seeing the savings, along with using it for budgeting tools as well. We also offer yearly owner's agent technical assistance. This assistance is up to $12,500. It's offered usually in the spring, and it's available for multiple different reasons. Communities that are looking to maybe put a solar system on their landfill or to get into a net metering agreement and would like maybe to hire a consultant to help them through the process, they can apply for this assistance that way. Communities that have oil-heated buildings and would like to have audits done on those buildings, they also can apply for this assistance for that as well. And then there's other types of assistance that are listed in the grant application too. This assistance, like I said, is usually offered in the spring. It's on a first-come, first-served basis. Last year we had about $300,000 available. And then I always like to point out and put a link up here to our website. And one reason is because we usually offer about monthly emails once a month with all different things going on, but we do each month offer a webinar, and the webinar is on different topics each month. We always ask communities to, if they have a specific thing they want to learn more about in the energy field, to let us know. And then we also like people to just sign up to see what's going on, any grants that are even outside our program. We work closely with the Mass Clean Energy Center. We also work closely with other agencies such as DEP, who has an electric vehicle rebate right now, and we like to make sure our communities are aware through our website along with our email list. Now, moving on to the designation and grant program, the reason that I'm here tonight. It's really been our flagship program. The program for funding has up to $10 million a year, and the funding comes from RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So I always like to point out that it's not out of the state budget. In order to be eligible for the funding, a community would need to meet 5 specific criteria, and the criteria go over all different aspects of the community. The first one is to adopt as-of-right siting, and there's 3 different ways a community could do this: through renewable energy, alternative energy generation, research and development, or manufacturing. On the generation side, what that would mean is just siting an area within the community, say for solar, that would be able to hold a minimum size of 250 kW. It does not mean having to put in the solar system. It just needs to be by right, so no special permit, of an area of at least 250 kW, and that'd be about an acre in size. Now, criteria 2, adopting expedited permitting, goes along with criteria 1. And what that means is for that site, that there would be as of right, we would want to see a period of no more than 1 year that that site could be permitted, so 12 months or less. For communities, I'm not sure if Millis fits in here, but they have 43D. That's an expedited permitting process that some communities went through and deemed certain parcels 43D. That's a 180-day process. So if Millis already has that in place, they would be able to look at that as a part of the process that maybe they could link with criteria 1. Now, criteria 3, we already spoke a little bit about it in the introduction, and that's to create an energy reduction plan. I look at criteria 3 as 2 parts. The first part is to put together your baseline, and the baseline is all municipal energy usage across municipal buildings, all vehicles, and street and traffic lights if you own it. And the reason I say if you own it is because the way you really want to think about the energy reduction plan is you can only control and reduce energy in buildings that the community owns. And that means if you don't own your traffic and street lights and the utility owns them, it makes it hard to be able to control what's done there to reduce the energy consumption. So that's kind of the way you want to think about it in the types of buildings that are also included. So it's only municipal usage in this case. Now, the next question I always get is, well, what if we've done things in the past? Can we take advantage of them as far as reduction measures? And the answer is yes. We always want to give that opportunity to communities that have been proactive and been doing things up to this point. So when you go to set your baseline year, if you wanted to go back, you would be able to go back 2 years from the point of which you were applying and take advantage of any of those measures that have been in place within those 2 years. But I always like to say to communities, when thinking of, if you ever choose to go back 2 years, that means you only have 5 years total to reduce your energy consumption by 20%. So if you set your baseline 2 years back, you'd only have 3 years from the point of being designated to make up the rest. So if you only saved 4% and you still had 16% to go, you might not want to set your baseline back 2 years. Moving forward, I just always like to give a little plug to Mass Energy Insight. The way that most of my communities have met Green Communities designation through the Energy Reduction Plan is to use Mass Energy Insight. And one of the biggest reasons is because when we launched Mass Energy Insight back in January of 2010, we were able to work with the investor-owned utilities, NSTAR, National Grid, Unitil, so that they would download directly into the tool the gas and electric usage that was already in the municipality. So you don't have to manually enter it. It'd be in there for you. It doesn't mean there's not work on the municipality side. The municipality still has to get on, has to set up their accounts, make sure all the accounts are listed, and make sure it's being tracked correctly. But at least there wouldn't be a manual data dump that would need to be done every month. On the oil side, for oil-heated buildings, those do have to be entered in any propane usage as well. The map up here can show you that there are a lot of communities that are currently using Mass Energy Insight. This map is a few months old, so Millis isn't listed on here, but I'm happy to say that in the next version of the map, they will be green because Bob's actively using Mass Energy Insight, and I've gotten multiple questions from him on the tool and how to properly use it and make sure that the town's taking advantage of everything that it offers. Now moving on to Criteria 4. Criteria 4 is to purchase only fuel-efficient vehicles. And what that means is to put in place a fuel-efficient vehicle policy. And the fuel-efficient vehicle policy has a mile per gallon limit based on different types and categories of vehicles. So there's a miles per gallon limit for sport utility vehicles, for minivans, for pickup trucks, for small compact cars. But when people think of this, they say, well, is it going to have to be all hybrids? No. The 2012-2011 Explorer meets the policy. What the point of the fuel-efficient vehicle policy really is that when you go to purchase a vehicle, you look at the vehicle and the function of the job to make sure that they fit right. And that's really the point of it. It's making sure that, you know, if a compact car could be used, then maybe it makes sense. But does it mean that everyone should be driving one? Probably not for the type of function of their job, and that's why there are different categories in there. The fuel-efficient vehicle policy would need to be adopted by the Board of Selectmen along with the Energy Reduction Plan. Both school committee could look at the fuel-efficient vehicle policy and the Energy Reduction Plan, but we do only require a letter from the superintendent. Some communities have decided to bring it to the school committee, but it isn't required under the program. And then the last criteria is to reduce life cycle costs when feasible. And the recommended way to do this is through the Stretch Energy Code. The Stretch Energy Code is an appendix that came out by the Board of Building Regulations and Standards when it released the 2009 International Energy Conservation Code. And it was an appendix to the code that required a more stringent way of building. And it affects all buildings above and below 3,000 square feet. When it comes to residential, the really big difference in the building code to date is where the base code requires prescriptive, more of a visual test, and the stretch code requires performance test. Since 2010, as you can see, about 146 communities across the state have adopted the Stretch Energy Code, and it actually refers to about just above 50% of the population. Now, the next step. Today's presentation is really just to give a high-level overview of the Green Communities program, the 5 criteria you need to meet in order to get grant funding. And the next step would really be to look at the different criteria if the community chose to pursue Green Communities designation, see where the community's at, relating to each criteria, and then obviously setting up a presentation on the stretch code. Every community that I've had that's become a green community, I would always recommend them to set up an informational forum, invite the residents, invite staff to learn about the stretch code and also just the base code. The stretch code would need to be brought to town meeting and voted at town meeting to see if it fit right for Millis. And in order to do that, you really need to understand what the actual base code is and then how does the stretch code relate. Our division has worked with ICF International. They run the Energy Star for Homes program. We've been working with them over the last 4 years, and we have a consultant, Mike Berry, who's done, I don't even know how many presentations to date, more than I can count, on the stretch code, and is very familiar on the different aspects, a lot of the questions that could come up, and really help the community understand if this is right for Millis. Meet the Green Communities. I'm happy to say that last week we announced the round 8 of designated green communities. That brought us up to 136 designated green communities to date. The map previously, you saw 146 have adopted the stretch code. On this map, you see 136 are green communities. A lot of the time, many communities decide to take, stretch code to town meeting, see how it goes, and then to see if they want to meet the other criteria. So, or they only have the resources within the community. Not all of them are beneficial to have an energy manager. So what they choose to do is focus on one criteria, complete that, and then go to the next one. So most of those 10 communities are working on their energy reduction plan in preparation for going for next year's designation. We only have designation rounds in the fall. So if communities happen to have their town meeting, say they want to go for a fall town meeting after our designation round, then they would have to wait till the next round anyways. Now getting on to the good stuff, the Green Communities funding. So the way the funding works, as I said, it's up to $10 million annually, and the designation amount that's available to communities is based on an allocation. So every single green community from the beginning, we've said, would get some funding. And the way that's done is we give $125,000 as a base amount, and then additional funding is given based on the per capita and population of each community. So for Millis, you'd be looking at roughly about $140,000 for a designation amount. And what that means is, I can speak from the communities that are just coming through in this round 8. They applied in October. They just were announced as designated green communities last week. Once the email and the award letter and the phone call goes out saying congratulations, you're awarded, you find out exactly how much you're eligible for under designation, and then grant applications are due about 2 months later. So you know exactly how much you're applying for through the grant, because you already know what you're designated for, and then it's basically coming up with the projects that you want to prioritize, the energy efficiency type projects. A lot of the funding that comes in the beginning is all conservation measures, looking to meet that 20% reduction. So when communities are putting together their energy reduction plan, they're thinking about the types of measures and stuff that they're going to be putting on the grant application and ask for funding for. When you add the couple million that we awarded last week, we're up to $40 million we've awarded since our first round back in May 2010. We've had the beginning of the program, we were offering 2 designation rounds each year, and then in 2012, after we'd had just about 100 designated green communities, we'd said from the beginning that existing green communities, once you spent all your funding, you'd have opportunity to receive more funding. So in the spring of 2012, we launched our first competitive round. And then we went for a spring competitive round for existing green communities to come through for up to $250,000 a year, and a fall designation round for those communities that wanted to get into the pot and become a designated green community. So to date, between competitive and designation, we've awarded just about $40 million. It's $39 million and change. $39,700,000 change, but I'm not counting. And those kind of projects are energy conservation projects. We also, what we've done in the past is communities, when it comes to the fuel efficient vehicle policy, have asked if there's money for vehicles. And we won't pay for a vehicle, but what we will allow you to do is if Millis was looking to purchase, say, a new Fusion, they could ask for the incremental cost to get a Fusion hybrid, and we would cover that under the designation grant. So to date, we have 74 grants complete, totaling about 500 projects. Of those 500 projects, it's about $26.7 million in total project costs. Of that $26 million, $17 million came from us, our grant funds. $4 million came from the utilities. We really work hard with you to work a really strong relationship between the municipality and their utility. When they get our grant funding, we want to make sure it can go as far as it can. So we want to make sure the utilities are in there providing any incentives that they have so that the community can get more projects covered. And then it covers about $3.73 million in payback. So it's pretty good, decent payback if you look at the numbers. Going forward, we definitely are going to work even harder with the utilities. I'm not sure you guys are familiar with the 3-year plans. I hope you are. Even if you're not a green community, you want to make sure that you're reaching out to utilities. I know I've been here to Millis in the past with National Grid for other matters at the wastewater treatment plant. So I know you guys are reaching out and getting grants on those sides, but it'd be great to get grants for the municipal buildings as well. And then that's it for me.
All right.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there any initial questions? Mr. Wise?
I do have a question regarding the vehicles, Kelly.
Sure.
That is, not every vehicle in town is included, or there are some that are exempt?
Yeah, so it's more, I like to think of the policy applying more to administrative type vehicles. So vehicles that are over 8,500 pounds would be exempt, so heavy-duty DPW trucks and such. Police cruisers, there isn't a fuel-efficient model available yet, or enough of them yet, so that we would put them as a category in the policy, so they're exempt. Other vehicles are exempt are cargo vans, and there is a list in the guidance of the policy. But that's some of the main ones that people usually ask about.
What about the utilities? You'd mentioned working with utilities. So what can we look forward to? I mean, we're going to be looking at reduction of energy use through some of the buildings that we have.
Mm-hmm.
We're building new buildings in town. So where would the utilities be coming in on this?
Well, regardless of being a designated green community or not, and even working with me too, I'm happy to always set up and facilitate meetings with the utilities. One thing that National Grid just brought around in the last year is they've made a contact at National Grid, his name, and NSTAR. NSTAR's had Steve Gratton for a while, but National Grid just brought in someone on the gas or electric side that can deal with just municipalities. So both now have someone, a point person, that would come out, meet with the municipality, talk to them about the different incentives, and it makes it much easier because before, the account reps that handle commercial, industrial, and municipalities were all one, and it made it a little bit difficult when you were dealing with the different types of grant programs.
Did you have a question?
I've got a question on the audits on the buildings.
Sure.
What's that involve? How much does it cost, depending on the size of the building? I mean, are there incentives to get deductions on that?
Yep, so I mentioned the owner's agent technical assistance at the beginning with audits, and that for oil-heated buildings, it would be covered up to $12,500. And then otherwise, you definitely want to reach out to your utility, and the reason being that they do work with project expediters and such that will come in and work with you on trying to get audits in your buildings assessed that are gas heated. And the reason that under our grant program we have that subsidy for oil is because the Mass Save program does have audits available on gas heated buildings, so you'd want to go directly through your utility for that.
Could any of the funding that's provided be leveraged for support of the ERP? So you would raise an example of streetlights. We don't currently own them. We're investigating what it would take to procure those. Can any of the funds be used to offset our costs in procuring those lights?
So procuring them, or you mean upgrading them to like LED? Is that...
Could be both. So currently we don't own them. We're investigating what it would take to purchase them.
Mm-hmm.
And then incrementally we need the inventory of LED or other materials that would allow us to use a more cost-efficient solution.
Yep. So in July, we announced our most recent round of competitive grants. It was just about $8 million. And one of the projects that you would see listed under there that a lot of communities applied for the up to 250 was to upgrade their streetlights to LED. To date, we've said that we won't provide the capital to purchase it, but we would provide it to upgrade the lights and convert them.
What you just said, you said you won't provide the money for the capital, but you will provide the money to upgrade.
It's like two pieces. So you have to actually buy, in order to upgrade them to LED, you need to own the streetlights,
Yeah.
and in order to own them, you need to purchase them.
Oh.
So our grant funds don't go to the purchase of them, but we will provide it to switch them out and upgrade them to LED.
Okay, so any retrofitting costs of those?
Yep.
Would be, okay.
Thanks for having me clarify that.
Does the town have to provide any matching funds for anything, or is this just straight, you get the money, and you can, as long as you economically justify it with a submittal to you folks?
Yeah, as long as you meet the 5 criteria, there's no matching at all. I mean, I'm going to be really honest in saying that, the energy reduction plan alone, it takes a lot of work and a commitment, and going through the approval process and really going through your inventory and seeing how much energy you're consuming, and then putting the time into figuring out what measures you're going to do to get to 20%, and then along with the other criteria, it's a bar to meet. And so with that being said, that's where, the designation grant funds come in, helping you get to the next step. But no, there's no matching on the designation side, and there's no matching on the competitive side. I mean, I will tell you that, looking at the numbers that I laid out of total project cost versus what we've put in and what the utilities put in, there is numbers in there where communities either gotten other grants to go along with the projects, or they've put in their own funds because, for example, on the, upgrading their infrastructure and buying the streetlights and then upgrading them, a lot of the time our grant of $250 is not going to cover the whole thing. And so the communities are putting in their own funds to do so as well.
We've heard of some organizations that will help increase the buying power of smaller communities as we look to maybe partner with Medway or other places. I think one of the organizations is MAPC that allows you to kind of use collective purchasing power. Are there other organizations, are you familiar with MAPC, and are there other organizations like that that we might want to investigate when we think about, as an example, if we were to procure our lights, how to offset some of the costs of that as well as other through partnerships with organizations like MAPC, or is that the primary, or are there other?
So MAPC is a regional planning agency, and they're really good about reaching out to their different members and being able to kind of bulk purchase and really helping them understand the procurement process and getting a good deal. And I know they've done it in multiple ways. So they're, it's really good that you are within their territory and they're providing those services. There's other regional planning agencies that have done it, but they have like over 100 communities within their territory, so that makes them have more resources to be able to do that.
You seemed a little cautious on when you were talking about meeting the 20% in the 5-year time frame, and how if you go back a year or two, do you have experience with communities that have done that and are having a hard time reaching, or may have a hard time reaching that 20%?
So
by having gone back that 2-year time frame or a year time frame?
So I have one community that went back 2 years, but they had seen like 11% savings. So they were in a good place to really do that, and they had done a lot, and they'd really been very proactive prior to the Green Communities program even being launched. So they were in that unique situation. So when we had our first grant round when we had first designation round back in May of 2010, there were a number of communities of the first 35 that chose to go back maybe one fiscal year. We've had 2 communities that chose to do that actually have to change their baseline year, which is not something that's always easy to go through, so that's why I always put that out there. But the majority of my communities, once they look into MEI and they put together their baseline and they see what their savings are, they in most cases pick a recent year, because if they've only seen 2 or 3% savings, it doesn't make it worth it to go back. I just usually, the reason I point that out initially is because I don't want people to put too much time into looking back instead of focusing on the future, if it makes more sense.
You mentioned that Millis is estimated to be eligible for $140,000. How long does that last for? Before the next, you mentioned you had your initial round. Those people then become eligible for second round. Okay, so we're in the second round. How long would it be before we'd be eligible for another round of funding after the initial round?
Yep, it's a great question. So you guys dictate that. So I have communities that were designated and awarded their first grant round in 2010, and they're still working on spending it. They've had, some issues. They've changed their projects. They've had some delays. They've had, maybe change in staff within the community. So, and then I have communities that came in maybe, a year ago, 2 years ago, and they've already spent their money and are going for the next competitive round. So basically, in order to be eligible for the next round, you have to spend the money that you're recently designated, and the person that decides how fast you could spend the money is the community. How quick they're ready to go with their projects, and the resources within town. So I have some communities that are on their third competitive round coming up, and I have others that just haven't spent their first designation. It's a wide range.
So, definition of spent.
So in order
allocated or actually executed?
Yep. So in order to be eligible, we have a competitive round that's going to be open soon for March for existing green communities. In order to be eligible to apply and submit an application, you need to have all funds spent Project's complete, final report in, I come out and do a site inspection and make sure the funds went to exactly what you applied for, and all that has to be done and, signed off on prior to you being able to apply.
What's your experience in the schools, working with schools, towns working with schools? I know Millis just had a junior high school rooftop solar photovoltaic come online. What's the best strategy for the town and the schools to work together on this?
Usually it works best when there's one point of contact between both. I mean, you're going to need, you definitely need on the reduction plan, someone to be able to verify the data, the accounts, what looks right, especially going forward. I mean, just when you become designated, that's the first step. But staying designated is also the next step. So once you become designated, there is going to be reporting. It's making sure the projects get implemented. Just the question about when can we go for more funding, it depends on how the team's working together. And that starts right at the beginning in the process of just putting together your designation application and making sure that, Mass Energy Insight is set up right from the beginning, and having someone on the school side that can, usually the schools are a larger user and consume more, so having someone over there that can understand, make sure the accounts are right, make sure they looked right, make sure everything's in there from the very beginning. And then, with Mass Energy Insight and reducing it by the energy reduction plan having to be reduced by 20% over a 5-year period, you just brought up a different point, which is PV projects, solar projects. So the way that works is it's wonderful. We encourage it. We obviously give owner's agent technical assistance to help so go on. Another division at the Department of Energy Resources runs the SREC program, which helps finance solar systems. But when it comes to reducing the municipal energy usage by 20%, it doesn't take into account solar systems because you're still using the same amount of energy. It's just coming from a cleaner source. So what would have to happen is if you were setting up Mass Energy Insight, you would actually be entering in the production from the solar system into Mass Energy Insight and tracking it, because it's basically the same thing as if it was coming from the utility. It's just coming from the solar system, so it would need to be accounted for in there in the baseline. So there would be someone doing that too.
Question on that. So is that true whether the energy produced is going back into the grid or stored locally? So either case, it's part of your so for generating power.
Yeah, because if your building was using, for easy numbers, 1,000 kilowatt hours, and then you put up a PV system that offset it, it's still using 1,000 kilowatt hours. It's not being reduced. It's just coming from a different source.
Okay. So even in a case where there was excess, I don't know that we have good data yet, but if
that would be different. Excess would, because that's something that you're selling it back, but you're not using that. So you'd want to, track that, but it's just what you're using and being offset. If it was behind the meter at the building, it'd be drawing down and reducing your bill, but that still needs to be accounted for as energy that's being consumed.
Great.
When you go through the grant application, what are the key criteria in terms of, justifying? You put in a grant application, you have to illustrate savings that are going to exceed costs, presumably. Is there, payback periods or some threshold criteria you have to meet in order to get to have your project accepted?
Yeah, so one of the things that's definitely an easier rule of thumb is knowing that the utility will provide an incentive, because usually utilities have a margin and a payback that they'd want to see. Depending on the measure, it can vary between measures of what they would want the payback. And in the spreadsheet that you would be filling out for the grant application, that's very similar in a lot of ways to how you track your actual and show how you're going to reduce your municipal usage by 20%, is going to show what's the total cost, what's the savings in kilowatt hours, therms, so on, and what the payback would be. And we do look at those, but it depends on measured life of the equipment. Are we talking weatherization, or are we talking a new boiler? It depends on if it's oil and it's getting no incentives versus a gas boiler that's getting incentives. So it can vary depending on the type of project.
So what are reasons that you might shoot down an application?
Someone just looked at a report of replacing their boiler, and it had I hope they wouldn't apply in the first place, but it had a 57-year payback. I don't know if that would be the best use of their funds. I don't think that would be a project that would go through. So, I mean, those kind of things happen. Sometimes you see stuff with like 60-something years and, but weatherization, something that's not measured life, doesn't have equipment that you need to replace, it could have a little bit longer of a payback and still make sense to do.
So for criteria 1 and 2, are most towns, have most towns set aside an area and zoned it for production of renewable energy, or are they looking more towards research and development or maybe manufacturing in renewable energy?
So a lot of communities have chosen to do a solar bylaw regardless of the green community so that they just have a process in place. A lot of communities have vendors calling them, talking about solar projects, what the process would be, and they've decided to just go through the process, bring it to town meeting, and have something, so that the planning board and such know how they want to handle those kind of projects. And in that case, they might already, I have a town I'm working with right now that's looking at green communities, and they already have a solar bylaw, and it works, and it meets criteria 1, and obviously they would pursue that. Other communities, especially depending on when they come into the process of looking at the 5 criteria and when they plan on coming in for designation, they might just look at the way their zoning is already set up, and if they meet it through manufacturing and R&D, just choose to go that route. The benefit to going through on the generation side is we do give out a little bit additional grant funds. The last 8 rounds for anyone that goes through by generation of solar, a couple have done it through wind, have received about $10,000 in extra grant funding. So that would bring you up to like $150. But I have a lot of communities that have just done it through research and development and manufacturing. We have a list on our website of those that have chosen to go through generation, but it's probably less than half.
Out of curiosity, when, one of the things that electric suppliers are out there, third-party suppliers, are offering green portfolios. If the town wanted to pay an incremental amount towards a green portfolio for their energy purchases, is that something that would qualify?
As far as grant funding?
Yes.
I think that's a great question, and I think that that's something that you would definitely want to pursue more. I haven't been asked that question before, but I think it makes sense something to go through and find out if there's possibility there. From the very beginning, we've told communities that, especially on the designation side, you have more flexibility with the funding that's eligible and what types of projects. We've always said we want to hear from people who have, innovative. Some of my communities have chosen to do different things along with other regions. One of my communities asked to have about $20,000 of their designation funds go to hiring someone at the schools, more of like an energy advisor, working with the students, working with the teachers, doing that, and we funded that. That wasn't a normal thing. I think that's the only town that's asked for that, but it was allowed. Other communities have asked for maybe an additional amount of money to bring what the mass save rebates are to a higher level and, push efficiency even more at some of the existing buildings, especially communities that have, are pretty built out and they're not having a lot of new construction. They have a lot of rentals. So that was something that, one community asked for. And then we have a list on our website of the funding that each community has received and the types of projects that they've asked for for the funding. And, they read it and some communities build off of that. So I think that would be a great thing to look into. The other thing some communities ask for is feasibility studies, too, to look at, if they have sites for solar, what would their landfill be able to have for a PV project? And we have had some come for that as well on the designation side. On the competitive side, when you're going up against other communities for the same pot of funding, our grant application is, I want to say, a little bit stricter, where we list the qualified and non-qualified projects. So if you have innovative things that you'd want to do, I would definitely tell you to pursue it on the designation side.
Are you seeing mostly solar, it sounds like? You mentioned some wind. There's no geothermal, is there?
So when Bob asked the question about criteria 1 and coming through for either generation, as of right, or alternative energy generation, research and development, and manufacturing, on the generation side and communities coming through and approaching it like that and the way that they're setting it up as of right, so no special permit, I've seen, in my region, it's all solar. But when you're actually talking about funding opportunities, we do have funding opportunities for, if you were looking at geothermal or other things under a competitive round. He was talking about specifically siting.
Okay.
Kelly, what would be a fair way to bring up a good townwide debate on the stretch code?
I think that before a debate, I would say the next step is really to understand the stretch code. I think that, before 120AA, there wasn't an optional code that you'd bring to town meeting and have people vote on. And before you have people vote on something, they should understand it a little bit more and how it pertains to the town. And so having an informational session and just explaining what it is, it's a topic in itself. It's usually about a 30 to 45-minute presentation is a good start. And then obviously allowing people, just like we're doing tonight, ask questions to get a better understanding of it. And that usually can lead into a debate.
Who would be best to present the information?
So we work with ICF International. They're a consultant of ours. They also run the New Homes program.
Right.
And Mike Berry's been doing presentations in my region along with other regions across the state. He's done at least 60 presentations on the stretch code as it's evolved.
Is that one of the more common challenges? Is the stretch code one of the more challenging of the criteria to adopt?
Yeah, so the energy reduction plan is usually the most time-consuming, just because of what it involves in kind of setting things up, depending on where the community's at and if they've already been tracking the energy usage and maybe they've already been using mass energy insights. So the energy reduction plan definitely takes time, and then coming up with and finding out and getting reports and speaking to the utility and figuring out what measures you can implement, what's already been done, how much savings it will bring. There's a lot involved in that. And then the second one is the stretch code, and the reason being just because it involves outreach, and it's town meeting, and it's making sure that you're going to the right boards and bringing people up to speed and seeing how people feel about it and making sure people understand what it is and getting the right information out there so that they can, make it the appropriate vote.
Is there a question on here, or has it been answered?
I have a lot of questions.
If you have questions, if you'd like to, if you could please speak.
Well, since we're talking about that.
Can you use the microphone, please?
Oh.
Yeah. All right, we're here for an hour. Keep it short, all right. Chief says for me to keep it short. All right, Mike Giampietro, building inspector here in the town, been here for about 12 years. We talk about the stretch code. Prior to 2009, the state had our own building code. Right? Legislation mandated that we adopt the latest IECC energy code, not the BBRS. The legislation did, which for building officials and developers has been a tough thing to grasp. All right, we have the 2012 IECC energy code in place now, which is mandated through the legislation that the state has to adopt any new energy code that comes from the IECC to within 1 year of its development. Right, so we have the 2012, which is the stretch energy code is based out of the 2012. So we have a new stretch energy code coming. Now the whole state, which this stretch energy code, the green communities, produced a lot of one town is a green community, one town is not. What do we do in this town versus what do we do in that town? So now what the state has done through the BBRS and legislation, now we have the 2012 energy code, which meets the stretch energy code. So it's on the same plan level. Now it's come to our attention that DOER and the BBRS is meeting for another stretch energy code, all right, a new stretch energy code. So, my main concern is if the town of Millis adopts being a green community, what do we adopt? What is the new stretch energy code? There is none right now. It's being worked on and developed. That's what I would caution on the most. This whole concept is, what do we have for new stretch energy code? What is the state going to mandate everybody to do? Right now, it's tough to meet your 3-year changes per hour in a new construction. The cost of new construction has skyrocketed because of energy codes. Building officials throughout the Commonwealth are having a hard time understanding what these new codes are, and they're being changed and put upon us on a more sort of hurry up, let's get this through, push it through, and then who pays the price of it? It's the middle class person who's going to buy a house. So we need to understand the energy codes more, I think, as a town, of what we're going to be getting ourselves involved with. We don't know what the stretch energy code is. We haven't even seen anything yet. of what the state has been talking about with DOER and the BBRS on what's going to be mandated for single and two-family dwelling units to meet the new stretch energy code. We have no idea. I mean, right now, we have to have an R49 in your ceiling. You have to meet 3 air changes per hour. We're talking about 1 air change. So you're going to make your house tighter, more energy efficient, but you're not going to have any air coming into your house to have fresh air. They're talking mechanical air changes. How does somebody know how to change a fan when it doesn't work anymore? What stops somebody from opening a window anytime they want, which will complete the whole concept. So there's a lot of variables in the building world that has come out since the stretch energy code. We have a new stretch energy code. I think we should understand it, know what it is, and how we're going to deal with it. It's a very important part of this whole puzzle. So I'll keep it long enough. That's fine.
Yep, but just stay there, because I want, because, yeah, can you stay there? Yeah. So one difference, because you're here, and because we want to explain both sides of it, so the difference between, what's the difference between the base code and the stretch code then, right now?
What's the difference between the existing stretch energy code that we have,
Yep.
right? And what is the new stretch energy code that the state is working on developing?
Which I know that point. I get that. But before you can explain, you got to understand the difference between what a base code is and the stretch code. So
Well-
even though you said the stretch code, the base code requires, 3 air changes and things like that, the stretch code doesn't require that.
Well,
So in some ways, the base code's a little more stringent than the stretch code is right now. And the reason is because what he's talking about is that we haven't. So it was said that when the 2012 IECC became into effect, which happened in July 1st, it's correct, that the base code changed, that there would be a new stretch code. And what was always put out there was when, you did go to town meeting and you had it in your article language that it said future editions of the stretch code. So those communities that adopted the stretch code as it is right now, which they're still on the same one that they adopted back in 2010, that they would go to the new stretch code. To date, there's still no draft language. I can be really honest in saying I've been with this division for 5 years, and people were asking for the draft language before I had my son when I was pregnant with him, and now he's 15 months old, and there's still no draft language out there. So that's just something to be aware of. So there isn't there's draft language that we have in place that we're not disclosing. There isn't draft language right now. So the ICC went forward with the base code, and that's changed. So one thing that is out there now is people that are on the base code, like I said, it's a prescriptive code, and you could probably fill in more than I can on this. So it's a visual, so they have to meet these 3 air changes per minute. They do have to do more testing. They have to do blower door testing and stuff. But the whole real big difference still between the base code and the stretch code is the stretch code's on completely performance, which means you have to have a certain rating. So you buy your car, you get a mile per gallon rating. So the same thing when you go into the stretch code. Your house is rated based on the performance it's going to have with regards to energy. So the stretch code doesn't require that you have 3 air changes per minute. It doesn't require an R49. What it says is you need to meet a certain rating, and there's give and takes to it. I'm not saying that he's not right, that there wasn't expected to be another stretch code, and it would be more efficient and supposed to be a little more of a stretch than what the base code is. But the way of thinking between the stretch code and the base code is different too, and that's where the question of, what's challenging, it's the way of thinking about it. You're doing modeling in order to get to the stretch code. You meet with a home energy rater, which is an independent rater. They look at your house, and they look at how it's being designed to meet a certain performance, which is currently 70 for above 2,000 square feet and 65 for below. And this HERS rating came out from the mortgage industry way back when they were trying to figure out how to give out more energy efficient loans. And now it's been adopted into this phase. And so what happens is they look at a performance, the HERS rater looks at it, models it, that's needed to happen before it goes to the builder goes to get the building permit, and then the HERS rater is involved in that process. There is a fee for the HERS rater. It's subsidized up to $900 through the New Homes program, an average of about $800 to $1,500. But right now, the two codes are very similar. The one big difference is, under the HERS rating, if you live in an oil-heated home, oil boilers are not as efficient as gas. So you'd have to make it up somewhere else. If you put in a really efficient condensing boiler, you might not need to put in R49. Under efficiency, what high efficacy lighting, the stretch code doesn't require as much as the base code does. It's give and take. They want you to meet a certain performance, a certain overall standing where the prescriptive path tells you exactly what you need to do. So it gives more flexibility to builders. But I think, just like I said from the beginning, it's a 35, 40-minute conversation, understanding everything he's talking about. The question he has is something else that other communities have raised and had concerns about. So it's not the first time. It's not something to consider. I always tell communities, you know what? I can understand how people can be a little concerned with adopting something that they haven't seen yet and understanding where it's going to go and make sure that there's local control at, Millis's level. I think that's an important thing that he's bringing up.
All right, in the interest of time, I have nothing else to say.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but that has just really confused me even more.
That's why you need a presentation.
So,
Yeah.
exactly, that's why I think it would be a great idea if we could maybe, one of the meetings, have that presentation so that everyone else in the community can see what, and then we can start evolving with the questions.
So we'll capture that as future new business
Yeah.
to address that. So maybe we circle back to the energy efficient vehicles for a moment.
Sure.
So it sounds like it would behoove us naturally to have vehicles that are more energy efficient or consume less and help our costs there. But is there any kind of mandate that a portion of the fleet or anything like that after the 5-year period is fuel efficient, or is it more of just having a policy that as you replace vehicles, you have an accommodation for fuel efficient or this minimum?
Yep. When you go in to adopt the policy, you're obviously going to already have a vehicle inventory, and the vehicle inventory is already there. So it's really working with the vehicles that you go to replace and making sure that as you purchase new vehicles or replace a vehicle within the inventory, you meet the policy. And the way you do that is by a miles per gallon rating. And as Bob pointed out earlier, there are multiple types of vehicles within the community that would be exempt due to the fact that they don't have enough options right now that are fuel efficient, or like heavy duty DPW trucks, things like that. And there's no need to put tractors or trailers or like bulldozers or things like that on the inventory. Because if you know of an efficient way of doing it, let me know.
On the ERP, in terms of tools to help communities that may not be collecting all the data that's required for that program, is there something that's provided to help facilitate the gathering of that data or kind of guide folks?
For the energy reduction plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where Mass Energy Insight comes in. And the reason the web-based energy management tool is so helpful is, one, like I said, because the utilities put the information in there on the gas and electric side. You don't have to go to your bills. You might go just to check to make sure the account numbers are all right and making sure everything's in there that should be. And then the other thing that is nice about Mass Energy Insight is that we've tailored it to really work with those communities that are becoming a green community, and such that it allows you to enter solar projects to track their energy usage. It allows you to enter vehicle usage as aggregate so that you can put that right in along with streetlights. And then the other thing you can do too is as buildings come on, once you set your baseline, there's new buildings that are going to be built and come on. And those don't need to be included in your baseline, because otherwise it'd be very difficult to reduce it by 20%. But it doesn't mean we wouldn't want you to still track it in Mass Energy Insight. So it also allows you to exclude certain buildings from your baseline, depending on when they come online. And if they weren't already in the building stock when you set your baseline year.
Other questions? Mr. Aspinall?
Kelly, could you clarify the vehicle efficiency program? The schools are not required to participate in that?
They are. So both the energy reduction plan, thanks for asking this for me to clarify again, because I skipped over on the reduction plan side. So the energy reduction plan and the fuel efficient vehicle policy both need to go to the Board of Selectmen and be signed off. They also need to go, they need to have a letter at least of adoption from the superintendent, but some communities choose to bring it to the school committee too. And the reason I just bring it up right now is, we talked a little bit about timing. Anything that would happen, obviously we set a designation deadline for applications. You need to build in when it would need to go to the school committee or the Board of Selectmen into your timeline to have their sign off before submitting. But it's up to the town to choose whether they'd want it to go to the school committee or not. We'd accept either one.
Another question about the by right zoning. We had a project proposed here in a residential zone several months ago that didn't go forward, but it was a really poorly conceived project. It was smack dab in the middle of a residential area. In the by right zoning, can we restrict it to certain zones, like our industrial zone?
That's as long as it, so with the by right zoning for R&D and manufacturing, we would want to see it for an area that has a minimum of a 50,000 square feet of available space. And for the generation, I said, if you were doing solar, it would be at least a minimum of an acre. And so how you overlay that area, as long as you met those two sizes. A lot of communities, just because it makes sense to look at the whole map and see what other areas, just because the whole point of doing the as-of-right siting is to encourage those type of companies to come in and take advantage of those type of projects as well. So it's beneficial in two different ways for the municipality.
Did I understand you correctly, too, that if we had an organization that qualified for one of the by right zoning existing in town today, that we could use that as the zoning area? Did I interpret that properly?
Yep, so if you ended up that you've already gone through the 43D process, I'm not sure, that would be a question for like the town planner. If you already have parcels that are zoned 43D, then you could potentially look at those to also be the as of right, and that would meet the criteria too of the expedited permitting, because the requirement for 43D going through the state priority development process is 180 days. And on our website, we have guidance documents to each of the criteria, walking through the different steps and what would be needed in order to become designated, and what types of documents need to be submitted for each criteria.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
More questions here?
Okay. I think that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Kelly.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Information.
Thank you for having me.
To the board, any other new business that you wish to present? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, no? No? All right. With that, we will close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.
Hey, good, Greg.